So fellas, we're about to enter 2026 and it's safe to say the matchmaking so far from the UFC haven't been great. So I thought I'd go through every fight that I want to see in 2026 from the UFC and we'll go in there thick and fast with each fight. McGregor versus Chandler. I just want to see this whole shit done with between McGregor and Chandler. I think the White House card will be the perfect card to put this on. You've got a big American in Michael Chandler. You've got a superstar in Conor McGregor. Perfect White House main event. It's been going on since 2022 or 2023, whenever it was. I want to see it over and done with. I want to see McGregor return. Let's get this shit wrapped up and finished in 2026. There's been big talks of McGregor coming back. Get this done for the White House card. McGregor versus Chandler. Let's get this shit over and done with. Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. Again, I kind of just want this to be over and done with. I mean, I want to see the fight because we saw the fight the first time around, and it was looking to be one of the best heavyweight fights we've seen in a long time. 25 minutes of these guys going at it. It could have been a great fight. The eye pucks fucked it all up. So for the sake of Tom Aspinall's heavyweight reign, and just for the fight itself, I want this fight as soon as possible. Get it over and done with. Not only just, to skip over the fight, but like I said, I think the fight itself would be fun. Aspinall, Gane. Let's get that shit through. Sean O'Malley versus Peyton Talbott. Now, we've got Talbott versus Cejudo this weekend. I think this is kind of like a fantasy fight between like two guys, or two obviously exciting strikers in the bantamweight division. The second that Talbott entered the UFC, these guys were already kind of match made like a fantasy fight. You've got two dangerous strikers, two crafty strikers, guys who have never really been inferior on the feet in their entire career. I think if we eventually do see this fight, let's say O'Malley loses to Song Yadong and Peyton Talbott beats Cejudo, I reckon we can see this fight. I reckon this fight is a lot closer than we think, especially if Talbot does beat Cejudo. O'Malley versus Talbot, one of the best fights you can do, one of the most exciting fights you can do between two of the biggest names in the bantamweight division. So this is kind of a fight I'd love to see in 2026. And I also want to see Volkanovski fight either Evloev or Murphy. I know Volk said he wants to retire. I feel like retiring after the Diego Lopez fight is such like a blue ball for Volkanovski's kind of retirement fight. I want to see him against a fresh contender in Evloev and Murphy. They're obviously the most deserving contenders. I've gone over this a million times. So I want to see I want to see if Volkanovski can get through Diego Lopez, and if he can, I'd rather his retirement fight be against Evloev and Murphy. I know it's not going to be in Australia because they're not going to go to Australia twice, but just for the sake of the featherweight division, I think it would do a lot more for Volk's legacy if he was to fight Evloev and Murphy. So I'd rather him fight one of those guys. Tom Aspinall versus Poatan. Now, if Poaton's going to move to the heavyweight division, I don't want it to face John Jones. I think Aspinall versus Pereira makes a ton of sense. I mean, first of all, if we're trying to bring some eyes to the heavyweight division, we're trying to revive this division, there's no bigger star than Alex to bring to the heavyweight division. I think Aspinall versus Poatan will be a super fight at heavyweight. Massive for the division. Massive for Aspinall's title reign as well, because this is like the first big name he's fought. Like proper big name in the UFC. It's Alex's chance of winning a belt in a third weight class as well, and I think he's got a good chance at doing it. It would be a competitive fight too. So Aspinall versus Poatan. I think if we are going to see Poatan move to heavyweight, I'd want it to be this year. And I think Aspinall's the perfect opponent if he can get past Cyril Gane. So maybe late 2026, Aspinall versus Poatan. Poatan versus Ulberg. Now, before Pereira moves to the heavyweight division, I want to see him face Carlos Ulberg for like his last fight in the light heavyweight division. I think if he beats Ulberg, as far as I'm concerned, his light heavyweight reign, I'm happy for him to call it off. I just like this fight, man. Two strikers, two KO artists. It's not Poatan having to worry about Ankalaev. It's a brand new, fresh matchup in Carlos Ulberg. He's on this massive winning streak. He's a KO artist himself. He's a dangerous striker. Just knocked out Dominic Reyes. I think he's got like 3 or 4 ranked wins as well. Before Poatan moves up to the heavyweight division, I want to see him one last time, defend the belt one last time at light heavyweight. And I think Ulberg in the first couple of months of 2025 would be the perfect kind of final fight. Again, fun striker. And if Ulberg does win, well, we've got a new kind of star of the light heavyweight division, because obviously if he beats Poatan, it's massive for him. And it's not even like Ulberg, we need to save Ulberg for when Poatan's gone, because the likes of like Bogdan Guskov and Mercer, kind of the rest of the division is being taken care of. So Pereira versus Ulberg, I want that fight to be done. Aspinall versus Acosta and Lewis. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting Aspinall to fight 3 times, but I think whoever wins that fight between Derek Lewis and Wilder Cortez Acosta, I'd like him to face Aspinall. If Acosta can beat Lewis, undoubtedly he deserves a title fight. I think, what is that, 6 fights within like a 12-month period? He's already had 5 fights in 2025. If he can beat Derek Lewis, Acosta versus Aspinall would be the new fresh matchup to make in the heavyweight division, especially in the division where people complain about a lack of contenders. And if Derek Lewis can beat Acosta, he'd be on a 3-fight winning streak. And I think Derek Lewis versus Tom Aspinall, I've said this before, Aspinall is more skilled than Derek Lewis everywhere the fight goes, but I think to beat Tom Aspinall, it's going to take someone to clip that massive chin of his and knock him out, and there's no better guy to do that than Derek Lewis. So I'd actually really like to see whoever wins between Acosta and Lewis also take on Tom Aspinall in 2026. Khamzat Chimaev versus Imavov. Yeah, I don't want to hear anything about Chimaev moving up to 205. This should be the next fight in the middleweight division. There shouldn't be any debate around it. Imavov is the most deserving contender. I think he's got like 5 ranked wins and knocked out Adesanya this year and beat Brallo in a number 1 contender fight. Chimaev's only just got to the middleweight division, snatched the belt off Dricus. It's the best striker versus the best grappler in this division. You've got this rapid guy who moves like a flyweight. Definitely not a flyweight, but, you know, moves like a lightweight in Imavov. Great striker, and they've obviously got the best grappler, most dominant grappler right now in the UFC in Chimaev. So I think for Chimaev's first defense, I want to see him against Imavov. I don't care about Chimaev versus Poatan. It's a fight I want to see in 2026. And also Chimaev versus Hernandez. I think this is probably the most stylistically interesting fight he can make in the middleweight division right now, because these are the 2 best grapplers. Hernandez looks so dominant with his grappling. He fucking demolishes everyone. People call him a modern-day Cain Velasquez. I argue he's more skilled than Cain Velasquez. He's got this relentless gas tank, which we've not seen from Chimaev. He's got elite submission ability. His wrestling's amazing. I also want to see Pantoja versus Horiguchi. I think this is the most exciting fight he can make stylistically in the flyweight division, especially after the way Horiguchi beat the absolute crap out of Tagir Ulanbekov. He's made his statement in the UFC. He's obviously already a big name outside of the UFC, but the way he just beat the shit out of Ulanbekov, I think stylistically, the biggest threat to Pantoja in the flyweight division is Horiguchi. I'm not saying Horiguchi needs it next. I'd still like to see him face the winner of Royval and Cap, but I think if we can see this title fight in 2026, it might be the most exciting title fight he can make at flyweight after Joshua Van and Pantoja. So Pantoja versus Horiguchi. I feel like we have to see this fight before Pantoja retires, and hopefully next year. Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodrigues. This should have been the fight to make instead of Lopez versus Gene Silva, and it definitely should have been the fight to make instead of Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodrigues. I don't understand why the UFC haven't capitalized on this. We literally saw a massive debate, well, not a debate, but a massive argument kicking off at the UFC 314 press conference between the 2 of them. They both went at it, and I think the fight itself would be super fun. You've got arguably one of the best strikers, not even arguably, definitely one of the best strikers in this division. Yair Rodrigues, great kickboxer. You've got a scrapper in Diego Lopez. You put these guys against each other, especially with the rivalry that they've got in like a Mexico fight night, there's no way this is a boring fight. So I want to see this fight. When Diego Lopez loses to Volk, I think coming into like mid-2026, if Yair's ready, Yair versus Lopez makes ultimate sense. I still want to see this fight. Pantoja versus Merab. Now, I know both of these guys continuously say that they have no kind of ambition of fighting another champion, but I think if Pantoja can beat Joshua Van and maybe like a Horiguchi, and they're still both a champion, these guys are both like the most deserving champions when it comes to moving up a weight class, and especially Pantoja. So I just want to see that fight. They've cleared out their divisions. Merab's cleared out bantamweight. Pantoja's cleared out the flyweight division if he beats Horiguchi and Joshua Van. I just want to see this fight, man. And I know Merab probably beats Pantoja if it will be in the bantamweight division, but I think for the sake of Pantoja deserving it, and for his legacy as well, because imagine how big this would be for both of their legacies. If Pantoja can beat Merab, he has a case to say that he might be one of the greatest top 3 of all time. And if Merab beats Pantoja, I know he obviously isn't getting a second belt, but he's beat a different champion. And I think that would do wonders for Merab's legacy and probably puts him to the #1 greatest of all time in MMA. It's a champ versus champ, the 2 most dominant champs in the UFC right now. I still want to see this fight. I have no problem with them dominating their own weight classes, but I feel like it is one of those fights that kind of has to happen. And I'd love to see this fight next year. Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards. Yeah, you're right. I know it's not 2019, 2021, whatever, but I still feel like this could be a fight for the White House. Obviously, they've got this massive rivalry going on, and I think for the White House card, this kind of makes a lot of sense. I saw a lot of people talking about this fight after Leon got knocked out by Prates, and the more I think about it, it makes sense. Masvidal's come back to the UFC, gets to fight on a 1-fight contract in the White House against a guy that he dislikes so much in Leon Edwards. It's probably the most winnable fight Leon's ever had in a while, but he's also on a 3-fight losing streak, which makes the odds more fair for Masvidal. I think this in like July, June of 2026 at the White House, it makes sense. Obviously, I don't want to see Masvidal go on another run in the UFC, but this individual fight, I think makes more sense coming into 2026 than it ever has. Let's see that fight. Alejandro Pantoja versus Tatsuro Taira. See, Pantoja's got a list of options, I think, in the flyweight division that I'd love to see him take on. And I think if Tatsuro Taira can beat Brandon Moreno, this is a fight that I'm going to be interested in too, because I feel like Tatsuro Taira is the only guy in this division who can kind of match the grappling of Pantoja. Well, maybe Horiguchi as well, but I think at the top right now, it's got to be Tatsuro Taira. I mean, if he does beat Moreno, he's got a great case to say that he beats Pantoja. I mean, he's young. I've always called him like the Joshua Van of grappling. Like, he's got this really good jiu-jitsu basis. Taira arguably got the best Japanese jiu-jitsu in the division. division. His stand-up's improving rapidly as well. He's dropping people left, right, and center. It's again that whole narrative of youth versus experience. So I would love to see Taira versus Pantoja in 2026. If obviously there's no other option for Pantoja. And then Joshua Van versus Brandon Moreno. If Joshua Van loses to Pantoja or Moreno loses to Taira, I want to see this fight immediately. I think this will be one of the best boxing displays and one of the best 5-round fights you can make in the history of the flyweight division. Like, you've got two of some of the best boxers in the entire weight class, the entire division going at it. They're the only two top boxers in this division right now. You've got, obviously, Joshua Van, you've got Moreno. Those guys going at it. It's a guaranteed banger. The two best boxers throwing it down. So that is like a 5-round main event I'd love to see in 2026. Or if Joshua Van beats Pantoja and Moreno beats Taira, and that's like the next title fight in the flyweight division if they don't give Pantoja an immediate title fight. So this is kind of like a fantasy fight I've got. Moreno Van would be one of the greatest flyweight fights I think you can make in terms of how fun it would be. Get that fight done. Benoit Saint-Denis, either Gaethje or Oliveira, or essentially anyone in like the top 5 who would make a fun fight. You can also throw in Paddy Pimblett. You can also throw in Max Holloway, but Benoit Saint-Denis getting someone in the top 5 just because it's going to be guaranteed violence. Like, Benoit Saint-Denis has to be one of the most violent fighters in the UFC right now. He's finished every single fighter he's ever beaten before. He's always coming out there to scrap. He's now on a 3-fight winning streak with 3 straight finishes. Throw-checked Mauricio Hufe, knocked out Dariush. I know he lost to Dustin Poirier last year, but I think Gaethje versus Saint-Denis is guaranteed violence. Oliveira versus Saint-Denis is guaranteed violence. Holloway, Pimblett versus Saint-Denis is guaranteed violence. My point is, I hope we see Benoit Saint-Denis get a crack at the top 5 at some point in 2025, and preferably against one of the kind of BMF candidates in this division as well. Islam Makhachev versus Topuria. Now, I don't think this should be next, and I'll get onto this, but I think at some point, again, if we never see this fight, it kind of feels like we've been massively blue-balled by the UFC. At some point, and hopefully next year, I do want to see this fight. I think if Ilya can maybe, beat Arman Sarukian, and Makhachev can get 1 or 2 more defenses if you can squeeze that in next year, I think Topuria versus Makhachev, I feel like it just has to happen eventually. It's the biggest fight you can make in MMA. Pound for pound number 1 versus pound for pound number 2. The Canelo versus Crawford of the UFC. But if anything, it's more competitive and more promotable than that. So Makhachev versus Topuria, it would be the biggest fight you can make in modern history. I think it'll be top 5 biggest fights in UFC history. The 2 best martial artists on the planet. And hopefully next year we can see this fight at some point. I don't want it to be next. I don't want it rushed. But I hope at some point, and hopefully next year, we see Makhachev and Topuria. And before that, I want to see Makhachev against Gary and Shavkat. If we're going to see Makhachev defend the belt at 170, which obviously should happen, I think Gary and Shavkat should be the only arguments next for the belt. I mean, Shavkat's the most deserving. He's cleared out the division. He's got a win. Well, he hasn't cleared out the division, but he's on this big winning streak, undefeated, and he's beat Ian Gary himself. He's the most deserving contender, but since he's been out for so long, you kind of pass that touch over to Ian Gary. He's been insanely active, and apart from his close loss to Shavkat, he's beat Prates. He just beat the number 2 guy, Bilal. He's also beat Magne, Neal, Rodrigues, Page. He's a promotable guy. So Gary and Shavkat versus Islam Makhachev, I think would make ultimate sense for Makhachev's first defense in the welterweight division in 2026. Max Holloway versus Oliveira. I don't think there's a single MMA fan on the planet who's denying that this should be next for the BMF belt. This, I think, has potential to be the best BMF fight to date, and it makes more sense now than ever before. Like, you've got Max Holloway, who just snatched the belt from Dustin Poirier. Well, he didn't snatch the belt, he was already the BMF belt, but he was obviously knocked out and demolished Gaethje, beat Dustin Poirier, and the only other top lightweight he hasn't beaten in terms of BMF candidates is Oliveira, who just choked the fuck out of Mateus Gamrot. So Oliveira versus Max Holloway for the BMF belt, 5-round in a main event. Fucking huge, man. And I hope we see that fight coming into 2026. If the UFC don't book this next for the BMF belt, they've fumbled the bag. So Holloway, Oliveira, it has to happen. One of the most violent, high-profile fights you can make at 155. And you can even sell it as like a title eliminator where the winner gets a title shot. So Holloway, Oliveira has to happen in 2026. Gregory Rodrigues versus Ateba Gauthier. This is more of a fantasy fight than like a fight that has to happen. But I'd love the idea of Rodrigues versus Ateba Gauthier. Like, you've got 2 guys who are like crazy KO artists. Robocop's massive for the middleweight division, carries a ton of power, probably the hardest hitting guy in that division. The only other guy that can really contest that is maybe Joe Pyfer, but Ateba Gauthier as well, the middleweight, and Gane, who's on the rise, the best prospect in the middleweight division. Probably the most powerful fight in middleweight history. Ateba Gauthier, Gregory Rodrigues. I think this will be one of the most violent fights you can make at middleweight. And probably the most powerful fight where one of them's getting put to sleep. You just don't know who. Petr Yan versus David Martinez. I think if Petr Yan loses to Merab this weekend, this should be the fight to make in the bantamweight division. I think, again, similar to what I was saying about Moreno and Joshua Van, one of the best boxing fights you can make. You've got Petr Yan, who's arguably the best boxer in the UFC right now. So technical with the way that he throws hands and lands combinations. And Martinez has kind of just jumped onto the block in the last 12 months. He knocked out a can in earlier on this year, and on short notice, he just outboxed Rob Font, who was already classed as one of the best boxers in the bantamweight division. So Petr Yan versus David Martinez, Mexican versus Russian boxer. One of the best boxing kind of matchups you can make in the bantamweight division right now. So I'd love to see this fight, just for the, like I said, the different approaches that they take to boxing, the scrap they could have. Another great fight can make in the bantamweight division. Dricus du Plessis versus Brendan Allen. Yeah, this should be next, and I love the idea of Allen versus DDP, because I actually don't know who wins this fight, because Allen's a weird fighter where he'll like lose to guys who are good, lose to guys who are bad and beat guys who are good, kind of thing. And I think Dricus du Plessis makes sense. I mean, you've got a really good grappler in Brendan Allen, top 3 best grapplers in this division. Just beat Rainier in an impressive win, and before that destroyed Marvin Vettori. You've obviously got the former champion Dricus du Plessis, who's been able to beat pretty much everybody apart from Chimaev. I think it makes sense. Dricus has just lost the belt to Chimaev. Allen's on a winning streak. He just beat Rainier Dricus versus Brendan Allen. And again, it's 2 weird fighters. You've got Dricus, the most goofy fucking fallen piano fighter in the UFC. Brendan Allen, the most inconsistent guy in the UFC. 2 guys. Well, the thing is, they're kind of like polar opposites in the sense that Brendan Allen looks really good, but a lot of the time he just fumbles to win. And you've got Dricus du Plessis, who looks really bad, but somehow manages to get the win. So, Dricus, Allen, I want to see this fight at middleweight in like a fight night main event or like pay-per-view co-main event. And then Marco Morales versus Carlos Prates. I've gone over this a few times after UFC 322. Just booked a fucking fight for 2023. I think is a title eliminator in the welterweight division, especially after the way they both performed at 322. It's such an easy sell. 2 KO artists in the welterweight division. You've got a behemoth in this division in Morales, this guy who should be a middleweight, who just knocked out Sean Brady. He's knocking everybody out. And you've got Carlos Prates as well. The touch of death, pound for pound hardest hitter in the welterweight division right now. You put these guys against each other, I think it's one of the best fights you can make at welterweight right now. Imagine a 5-round fight that main event was announced. Carlos Prates versus Morales. I mean, like I said, it's not only the fight itself, the way it's probably going to end, but also the implications it has for the welterweight division too. So, Prates, Morales, I want to see that shit done ASAP. And Ilia Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan, the fight that we should have been seeing for the lightweight belt next. And that's why the whole thing about Gaethje versus Pimblett being for the interim belt is so frustrating, because this was the fucking fight to make, man. This is the Makhachev versus Topuria of 2026 with Arman Tsarukyan. You've got Tsarukyan, who is the best lightweight on the planet, not named Ilia Topuria. And how can you prove that he's number 1? By beating Ilia Topuria. It's not just a tailor-made matchup like Paddy Pimblett or fucking Justin Gaethje for Topuria to knock out. It's a legit threat. I wouldn't be surprised if Arman Tsarukyan's only a slight underdog. He's this great wrestler. He might be definitely the best wrestler right now in the lightweight division. Looked good on the feet against Dan Hooker as well. The most deserving, Arman versus Ilia, would be a super fight in my opinion at lightweight. The best fight he can make in this division, and I hope we do see this fight. Even if Topuria does fight the winner of Gaethje and Pimblett, I hope before he moves to welterweight, we just see this fight, because I don't want Topuria to have, duck Evloev in the featherweight division, duck Arman in the lightweight division, and then have an easy road to welterweight. I want to see Topuria get tested, and this is his biggest test. Let's see the fucking fight. Israel Adesanya versus MVP. Now, this is one of those matchups that I feel like, I know a lot of people are going to say that it could be a really boring fight. It could be a staring contest. But I just think for all time's sake, I think now makes more time than ever. Like, even when MVP was in Bellator, this was always like a fantasy fight, especially when Adesanya was a champion and MVP was on the rise in Bellator, like 2 unique strikers who could pretty much outstrike everybody put in front of them. And there was always like a fantasy fight. 2 lanky dudes look pretty similar, have their own unique style, and they all managed to smash it by doing that. So, MVP versus Adesanya. Now that Adesanya's, he's on a losing streak, he just got knocked out by Imavov, and MVP just styled on Jared Cannonier. I think for like a main event, maybe not on main event, maybe don't trust 5 rounds, but even for like a 3-round fight on a pay-per-view main card or numbered card, MVP versus Israel Adesanya, I just want to see the fight for all time's sake. We're giving MVP someone in the top 5. We're giving Adesanya like 2 elite strikers, 2 historically great strikers in MMA. I want to see this fight. And then Valter Walker versus Jailton Almeida. The best grappling matchup you can make. Prospect grappler versus contender grappler. Walker versus Almeida. You've got Valter Walker, who's setting the record for the most heel hooks, the most scary submission artist in this division right now. 4 heel hooks in a row. And he's managed to make himself a prospect because of that. And you've got Jailton Almeida, who's probably the best grappler in this division. Should have beaten Volkov, but rightfully got robbed. So I want to see the grappling exchange between the two of them, because I want to know how Almeida would approach this. Would he try and stand up with Valter Walker? Would it cancel out and be a really boring striking match? But if they were to grapple, who would get the better of who? Would Almeida be tentative at shooting takedowns on Valter Walker? Imagine Valter Walker could find like a heel hook over Jailton Almeida. So yeah, Valter Walker's on a winning streak. Almeida's coming off a loss. Almeida, Walker, two of some of the best grapplers in this division. Two of some of the best jiu-jitsu in this division. I want to see this fight. And then Mauricio Hufe versus Quillen Salkild. I would not be mad if this is Quillen Salkild's next fight. He definitely deserves someone in the lightweight division. And both of these guys have a very similar kind of highlight reel in 2025. Both of these guys have scored a potential KO of the year contender with a brutal head kick, with Mauricio Hufe getting a spinning wheel kick and knocking out Bobby Green, Quillen Salkild knocking out Nasrat Haqparast. Two kind of prospects, I guess, right now in the lightweight division. You've got Hufe's coming off a bad loss, Salkild coming off a great win, Brazil versus Australia. I think this fight makes ultimate sense. I honestly don't know who the betting favourite would be, because with the way we've seen Salkild wrestle before, I think he could definitely be a favourite in this fight. And obviously, he's a great striker in himself, the best guy that Hufe would have fought, not named Benoit Saint-Denis. But obviously, Mauricio Hufe is still kind of that guy at lightweight with the striking. So Hufe versus Salkild. I want to see this fight in 2026. I think it's one of the best fights you can make at 155, but especially between two guys contesting for the top 15. I hope we see that fight eventually. Even for like the Perth card, I think makes ultimate sense. And then Valentina Shevchenko against the winner of Harrison and Nunes. Now, I also want to see Shevchenko against Natalia Silva, but I think Natalia Silva's next fight should be for a belt, don't get me wrong. But I think for Shevchenko's legacy, she deserves to fight the winner of Harrison and Nunes. Shevchenko's been around this division for the longest time. She's basically defended this belt for the longest time, owns the flyweight division, had a bit of a shake-up with Alexa Grasso, but she snatched it right back, beat Grasso again, beat Fierro, and just beat the strawweight champion in Zhang Weili. I'm not mad about Shevchenko moving up a weight class, because if Shevchenko can move up a weight class, she's basically beaten every champion of the modern era in women MMA. So whoever wins between Harrison and Nunes, I think will be the perfect fight for Shevchenko. And again, it goes back to the White House. If Kayla Harrison beats Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko fights Kayla Harrison in the White House, that's like the perfect White House co-main event. Champ versus champ, the two most dominant champs in women MMA right now. And a trilogy between Nunes and Shevchenko as well, I wouldn't be mad at as well. So I think Valentina Shevchenko fighting the winner of Harrison and Nunes, I think will be a massive fight for women MMA. And let's go over some fights I don't want to see for 2025. 2026. I don't want to see John Jones versus Poatan. Jones doesn't deserve to nitpick who he wants. I think if John Jones wants to come back, he has to be against Aspinall. I understand this will be a massive fight in MMA, one of the biggest fights you can do because you've got two stars. But Jones has been sat on his ass since November of 2024 doing nothing but tweeting. Alex is killing it right now. It's stylistically quite a bad matchup for Poatan as well, and I feel like it could just kill the hype for nothing. It would sell a shit ton of pay-per-views, but I feel like if John wants to come back, it's Aspinall or nothing. I'd much rather see two active champions in Alex and Aspinall go at it. Islam Makhachev versus Usman. The only guy who wants to see this fight is fucking Ali Abdelaziz. No one wants to see Usman get the next title fight. Welterweight, it's in the best spot it's ever been in. You've got Morales, you've got Prates, you've got Gary, you've got Shavkat, you've got all these different names in this division, and you want to bring out Usman, who's won one of his last 4 fights, who was previously on a 3-fight losing streak, and he's only coming off a win over Buckley, and he's, old, washed, whatever. You want this guy to be the guy to face Makhachev next for his first defense? Fuck that. Usman needs to be a top contender. The only guy who wants to see this fight is Ali Abdelaziz. I hope this is the next. With the way that we saw Lopez and Volkanovski announced, it probably will be. I don't want Usman versus Makhachev. No one who likes the fucking sport should. Topuria versus Gaethje. I understand if Gaethje beats Pimlet, he's probably going to get the next title fight, but it's just bullshit. If we see Topuria versus Gaethje before Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan, it's just, I have no interest in this matchup whatsoever. Justin Gaethje is literally a tailor-made matchup made in a fucking lab for Ilia Topuria. If you can make the easiest fight for Topuria, it would be Justin Gaethje. He's literally just a fucking dummy who walks forward swinging. I know he's become a little bit more technical, but he's also looking a bit more rusty these days. The easiest fight probably in like the last 5 matchups for Ilia Topuria would be Justin Gaethje. I'd argue fucking Josh Emmett is a more difficult fight for Ilia than Justin Gaethje, so I don't want to see the fight. At least if Paddy wins, you've got the rivalry between Ilia and Paddy's got a new style, and obviously I want to see Arman and Ilia, but I don't want to see Justin Gaethje versus Ilia. No interest whatsoever. Alex versus Chimaev. Can Chimaev stop fucking tweeting about moving up to 205 and taking on Porto? No one cares about this matchup. You've not even fucking defended the belt. First reason, it doesn't really make any sense, because if Chimaev was to dog walk Alex Pereira, first of all, he hasn't deserved that opportunity. And even if he did, you've just killed a star in Porto for no reason. Second of all, and the most deserving, or most important point, is Chimaev hasn't earned it. You've not even beat a single contender in the middleweight division. You beat Dricus to get the belt. You haven't defended it yet. No one cares about Chimaev versus Porto. Let's keep this as a fantasy fight and not a realistic fight. Merab versus... It says Kamaru Usman. Fuck Usman. Merab versus Sean O'Malley. Yeah, I've heard rumours that if O'Malley beats Song Yadong, he's going to get another crack at Merab. I don't care about a third fight. The first one weren't the most entertaining. Merab dominated him. This still didn't dominate him, but he won the fight. Second fight, Merab dominated him, got the finish. If O'Malley beats Song Yadong, do you really want to see Merab and O'Malley part 3? Is this really what we want to see? Just one win over Song Yadong and he's back in there with him? I don't want to see this. I think I just don't want to see this fight again. I want it to be the last. Tom Aspinall versus Volkov. I do feel really bad for Volkov. He's had a bit of a cursed career. He got robbed against Cyril Gane, and then now he's just beat Jelton Almeida. But with the way that heavyweight's going right now, Cyril Gane's probably going to get a rematch with Tom Aspinall. And then after that, it's got to be like the winner of Waldo Cortez Acosta and Derek Lewis or Alex Pereira. I'm sorry, Volkov, but this is a game of what have you done for me recently? And a robbery win over Almeida, I don't think stands out compared to the rest of the heavyweight contenders, and I don't want to see this next, unless Volkov makes sense at a certain time. But those are the fights I do and don't want to see for 2026. Let me know your thoughts. What fights I've not included on this list that you want to see for 2026? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.